This is pretty interesting to me, and that is the glove beef in the lead up to Canelo versus Golovkin, the rematch. Because Canelo wanted to wear a pair of gloves called No Boxing, No Life, a brand of gloves called No Boxing, No Life, which are actually designed by members of his team, which have only been worn in a handful of fights before, professional and I think amateur fights. The gloves were initially approved by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, but after protest from Team Golovkin, I guess that approval has been withdrawn and Canelo is no longer allowed to wear those gloves. So now Canelo will be wearing the same gloves he wore in the first fight, which were winning gloves. Now, the reason this is interesting to me is because Canelo has always been a fan of Everlast gloves, particularly the Everlast MX model, which are the horsehair, or at least partially filled with horsehair, model of Mexican gloves. So the padding is very soft, because it's horsehair, so it's not very dense, and therefore you can really feel your wraps and your knuckles through the glove. You can do more damage with those horsehair gloves to your opponent than with a more padded glove like a winning glove. And winning fight gloves are very rarely worn by professionals outside of Japan in pro fights. Loads of pros wear winning gloves in sparring, in training, but when it comes to actual pro fights, very few professionals outside of Japan, because it's a Japanese brand and plenty of fighters in Japan wear winning. But outside of Japan, like in the United States and the UK, very, very few fighters wear winning gloves. And the main reason is because they're very padded, and padded to the point where they not only protect your knuckles very well, but they also, to some extent, protect your opponent's face a little bit as well, because they are very well padded and soft, but not so soft that you can feel your knuckles through them, if you understand what I'm saying. It's a different kind of softness. Horsehair moves around in a glove. So, anybody who knows about the old school horsehair gloves, when you would put them on, you could start moving the horsehair around, by pressing your knuckle against your palm. This is something Mike Tyson used to do, even though Mike Tyson never really would wear horsehair gloves. He would wear normal padded gloves, Everlast gloves with foam in them. But he would start breaking the glove down. As soon as he laced up, he'd start breaking the gloves down, the padding in the gloves down, pushing his knuckle against the inside of his palm. And you watch Mike Tyson in the dressing room before his fights, when he was on his ring walks, you'd see him trying to break the padding in the gloves down. And it's easier to do when you're wearing horsehair gloves, because the horsehair moves around very easily in the glove, and you can move the horsehair all to the side, and then you've got literally your knuckles that you can feel through the glove. Whereas with padding, particularly like with the padding in winning gloves, it's not as stiff as the padding in a Grant glove, but it's still thick enough that you can't feel your knuckle through it very easily. And again, it protects your hands, but also to some extent protects your opponent's face. So anyway, I'm procrastinating here, people. The point I'm trying to make is Canelo has been a guy who wears these horsehair gloves. So for him to switch to winning in the last fight and then again in this fight, to me, shows that he's concerned about his hands. That there may be chronic hand problems potentially with Canelo. Because there was a rumor in the first fight, going into the first fight, that Canelo would hurt his right hand. And then that seemed to have some validity when he came to the ring in winning gloves, which he doesn't normally wear. I think he had worn them much earlier on in his career for one or two fights, but certainly during the majority of his championship run, he'd been wearing Everlast and Everlast MX, the horsehair gloves. So yeah, that's another thing that you have to consider if you're doing a prediction for this fight, or if you're betting on this fight. You have to consider the possibility that Canelo has now got hand problems. And also, if you look at a lot of Canelo's training footage, he's wearing knee supports. So maybe he's got hand trouble, knee trouble, and on top of that, he potentially is no longer on performance enhancing drugs. And why I say potentially is just to, play devil's advocate and entertain the possibility that his tainted beef story was actually true. So potentially his body is not going to be getting the boost in this fight, the chemical boost that his body got in the last fight. And so when you take all those elements together, the lack of the chemical boost, the knee issues, the hand issues, and you can see Canelo looks physically smaller. He's lost muscle mass. You put all those things together, that might influence your prediction. A lot of people are actually predicting Canelo to get stopped in this fight. And I can see from a logical point of view why they would think that. Maybe Canelo's not going to be as strong and all that kind of thing. But I also believe that there's a lot of wishful thinking from people, because there are a lot of people who just hate Canelo now, particularly after he failed the two drug tests. A lot of people have just turned on him, and they're praying that he gets beaten by Gennady Golovkin and knocked out. But one thing which Canelo will still have is his skills. He's still got the skills, even if he don't have the strength, which he had in the first fight, potentially. Canelo's still got the skills, You look at that first fight, Gennady Golovkin found it very, very difficult to land clean punches on Canelo. Oh, yes, he did. But Canelo did not find it difficult to land clean punches on Golovkin at any point in the fight. And that dynamic is not going to change. So don't underestimate Canelo's skills. Canelo is the far, far, far more skilled fighter here. It was actually a little surprising to me how big the gulf in skill was. How big the skill gap was in the first fight. I wasn't expecting it to be that wide. But Canelo was way more skilled than Golovkin. To me, he was almost clowning Golovkin a bit in the first couple rounds with how wide the skill gap was. So don't underestimate that. And also, Canelo's looking very fast. I've seen some of this training footage where he's throwing these Manny Pacquiao type combinations when he's shadow boxing. Hand speed looking very quick. So, I don't know, maybe his potential decrease in strength will be made up for with an increase in speed. Maybe an increase in stamina potentially. Or then again, people will say, nah, the tainted beef would have helped his stamina, so his stamina is probably going to be even worse now. Also, some people are talking about, many people are talking about the psychological effect that not being on PEDs might have on Canelo. Because it's almost like a psychological crutch, where when you're on the PEDs, you feel confident because you feel like I've got this special stuff in my system that, makes me Superman. When the special stuff is no longer in your system, excuse me, doubts might start to creep in. When you're in the ring and you're thinking to yourself, do I feel weak? Do I not feel as strong? Your mind can start playing tricks on you. So a lot of people have brought that up as a possibility. But one thing that a lot of people don't seem to be considering is the fact that Canelo, as far as I'm aware, did not have to take this fight. I mean, he didn't have to take the fight prior to the whole tainted beef controversy, but he insisted on taking it. There was no rematch clause for Golovkin. There was only a rematch clause for Canelo. Canelo insisted on taking the fight. Why was he so confident? And then after the tainted beef scandal, when Canelo potentially would have had to go clean, okay, we're assuming he's clean now, he was no less keen on taking the fight after the whole tainted beef thing. If this was going to be such a difficult thing for him psychologically to go into this rematch without his chemical enhancement, if that was going to be such a difficult thing psychologically for him to deal with, then why did he take the fight? Because apparently he didn't have to, but he insisted on it. So perhaps Canelo's confidence goes far deeper than a lot of people realize, and maybe he's got reason to feel as confident as he does. So just giving you guys some food for thought. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about this. It's happening. I'm out.